This is Optimal Finance Daily, episode 2082. You too can be conned by JL Collins of jlcollinsnh.com. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. And now let's get right to it as we optimize your life. You too can be conned by JL Collins of jlcollinsnh.com. I made an enemy this week. She's the widow of an old friend. Before he died, I promised to try to look out for her for a bit. During our recent conversation, she said I made her feel small. She said I made her feel stupid. There were tears. I'm very likely guilty on both counts. I'm not always tactful, but hopefully I saved her $2 million. Her husband died a while back. Over the years, he worked hard and had accumulated the $2 million. He loved his wife dearly, and he knew he would very likely leave her a widow. The money was an act of love. He wanted to be sure she would be financially secure. But he also knew 3 things that scared him to no end. Number 1, his wife believed in the free lunch. That is, she was always open to come-ons. Free cell phones were an example. Every time her cell phone contract expired, the provider offered a free cell phone, which she proudly grabbed. Somehow, she seemed to miss the 2-year contract it locked them into over and over. While small potatoes, it's a bad sign. Number 2, the world is filled with predators looking for precisely people like her. And number 3, money and this belief in the free lunch attracts them like sharks to blood in the water. It was this topic that set me off and brought her to tears. I was trying to gently coax her into appreciating the risk. She's a very bright woman and seemed to understand. But then she said, "Don't worry, I can't be conned." "With that you have," I said, and by this point my voice I fear was raised, "just violated the first rule of not being conned." Make no mistake, you can be conned, so can I. Here's one I came across many years ago. Fortunately, I read about it. In those days, I might well have taken the bait. Here it is. One day you get a letter, or maybe these days an email. In it, an investment advisor introduces himself and offers you a stock tip. ABC Corp is going to dramatically rise in price over the next week or 2. Don't invest, he cautions, without doing your homework. But his proprietary metrics are pointing to this one as a strong buy. You're no fool, but you decide to maybe keep an eye on it, just to see. Sure enough, it sharply spikes up. You could have made 50, 60, 100% on your money in just a couple of days. Letter 2 arrives. This one says BCD Corp is poised to take a sharp fall. Our metrics, it says, say short this stock. Shorting is a way to sell stock you don't own on a bet it will decline in price. You're a careful investor. Again, you decide to watch and see, although with a keener interest now. Sure enough, this one collapses as predicted. Had you acted, big profits would have been yours. Letter number 3 arrives, then number 4, number 5, and maybe even number 6. Each is dead on. The stock rises or falls exactly as predicted. Maybe you even took a chance and profited from one or more. Hard not to be impressed by now. I would be. Then you get an invitation to dinner at one of your area's finer restaurants. You and a handful of other executive-level investors are invited to an informal meeting with Mr. Hasn't Missed One Yet. He'll be discussing his proprietary investment metrics and how they've made him rich. At dinner, Mr. Hasn't Missed One Yet is soft-spoken. He's warm, kind, and concerned. He has all the trappings of wealth, but in a tasteful, understated fashion. Charts and graphs are presented. The exact investment approach is unclear, but then it is proprietary. This is to be expected. Oh, and barely mentioned in passing, it just so happens a couple of slots remain open in his latest investment pool. There's certainly no obligation, but of course, based on our experience, they'll be snapped up by tomorrow. So if you're interested, can you see the trick? And like all magic, it is a trick. If you can, and this is the first you've come across it, you're a better man than I. But don't get cocky. If not this one, there's another that will fly under your radar. It can happen to you. Fail to understand this and it will. That's the first rule. Here's the full set. Rule number 1, everyone can be conned. Certainly stupid people are marks, but so are the exceptionally bright. The moment you start to think that it can't happen to you, you've become a most attractive target. The easiest victims are those that think they're too smart, too knowledgeable to be taken. This means you, bucko. Rule number 2, you're likely to be conned in an area of your expertise. The reason is simple, targeting and ego. When con men pick a scam, they look for people to whom it will naturally appeal. Those are people in the field. People feel secure and safe in those areas they know well. They believe they'll be too smart to be caught unawares. Smart people know the areas they don't know and tend to be far more cautious there. Most of Bernie Madoff's victims were financial professionals. Rule number 3, con men and women don't look like con men. This isn't the movies. They're not going to have slouch hats pulled low over their shifty eyes. Successful con men look like the safest, most trustworthy, most honest, most stable, most comforting people imaginable. You won't see them coming, or rather you will, and you'll be warmly welcoming them. Rule number 4, 99% of what they say will be true. The best, most effective lies are surrounded by truth, buried in it. The con, the thing that will leave you broke and with real reason to cry, is carefully hidden. It's deep in the proverbial fine print. And rule number 5, if it looks too good to be true, it is. There is no free lunch, not ever. Your mama taught you this. She was right. Listen to your mama. Of course, not all cons are clever. An email from a Nigerian stranger offering you, random old you, millions to accept his money transfer should be obvious, right? The stranger knocking on your door and offering cut-rate home repairs because we just happen to be working in the neighborhood, if only you pay in cash up front, is a con man. You know this, right? Those are the kinds of simple cons my friend's wife was thinking about, and she's right. She's much too smart to fall for those. But those aren't what had her husband worried. It's the Mr. Hasn't Missed One Yets of the world who seek out the smart, the rich, and the lonely. If you've not already done so, have these conversations with your own spouse. Don't leave it to a tactless, although honest friend of the family like me. Given the actuarial tables and her good genes, my own wife will likely also outlive me by a couple of decades or more. Since I handle our investments, we have this conversation on a regular basis. We review what we own and why. Fortunately, she understands the principles and their importance. As an aside, this is one more reason I'm a fan of index funds. I want to leave her with a simple portfolio she can leave on autopilot. So far, these discussions haven't led to my making an enemy of her. Yet, I think. You just listened to the post titled, You Too Can Be Conned by JL Collins of jlcollinsnh.com. I think JL offers some great words of caution here. I'd add to this that you're more likely to be conned if your decisions are rooted in fear and or greed. And many of our money decisions are rooted in either fear or greed. It takes a lot of self-awareness to pause and really question if the offer being presented to you by a potential con man is sound or if it's appealing to your fear and or greed. Any truly sound financial decision doesn't need to be made overnight. Before you do anything stupid, it would be wise to pause, reflect, and discuss any big money decisions with your support system. This article also reminded me of a conversation I had with my friend Frank Vasquez over at Risk Parity Radio. He tirelessly answers personal finance questions that come up in the various Facebook groups we're a part of. So one day I asked him, which personal finance question does he see often that bugs him the most? And he answered that he commonly sees people who are looking for a magic button or a free lunch. Perhaps they haven't saved anything for retirement, and now they're in their 60s and they want to retire, so they're looking for advice on which stocks are going to have the most aggressive growth that might allow them to do so. But there are no real shortcuts when it comes to building wealth. You need time and regular contributions to allow compound interest to do its thing. And that will do it for today. Have a great day and rest of your weekend. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back in just a moment with our weekly bonus episode. So stay tuned for that, where your optimal life awaits.